meeting of the Economy Committee. Some members will be attending this morning's meeting via Starleaf, and our witnesses will be briefing via Starleaf. The meeting will be broadcast live when open to the public, and a recording will be made available on the committee's web pages on the Assembly website. So just to remind members to mute their tablet devices when they aren't speaking. So apologies, we don't have any notified apologies?
Not as yet, no. So we have everyone from Christopher joining and Murphy.
Okay, moving on then to item number 2. There are draft minutes at page 5 of your pack from the meeting held on the 9th of June. Are members content that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Content.
Just a bit late.
Okay, so moving on then to item number 3, which is Chair's business, and there's a couple of items just here to run through. So there is correspondence from the Dairy Council NI about an invitation for a virtual visit to an EU sustainable dairy site. The event will last up to an hour and a half and will include an overview of the supply chain, an introduction to the available sustainability case studies and evidence base, an overview of the sustainability practices being implemented at farm and processing level, and a brief panel discussion and the opportunity for committee members to ask questions. The ERA committee has also been invited, and the proposed date for the visit is Thursday the 8th of July, just before summer recess. The ERA committee meeting is that day already, and it's fairly crowded. So the clerks of the committees are looking at timing of 1:30 p.m. This may not obviously suit some members who have committees on a Thursday afternoon. However, it was seen as the best compromise. So are members content that the committee clerks would continue to liaise and to pin down an itinerary for members?
Great.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Then there are at page 2 of your table papers a presentation from the Human Rights Commission Business Forum on Employee Monitoring and Privacy, which the clerk attends on the behalf of the committee. So, Peter, do you want to?
Chair, this happens quarterly, and this was probably one of the most shocking meetings. And bearing in mind that the forum deals with a lot of issues, including likes of human trafficking, this was about employer monitoring. And I would urge members to have a good look at the slides, because some of the technology available is scary, really quite disturbing, including microchipping staff and all sorts of tags that they wear to do things, and the level of monitoring around screenshotting them and so on. It's all available technology. It's out there. There's no suggestion anyone local is using it, but it's out there. So if members want to have a look at that and potentially going forward, it's something maybe to discuss. Yeah. Especially with the working from home being so relevant now, and potentially looking at legislation on working from home coming. And the right to switch off and so on. I know there's a bill in drafting, PMB, Martina Anderson, I think. So it was a real eye-opener. So if members want to reflect on that, we'll bring it back when we get some further information. Yep, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So moving on then, just a final item of Chair's business is, and members will be aware we had an urgent question on Monday in relation to Stobart Air. The clerk emailed an update from Brian Ambrose at the City Airport to members on Monday prior to that oral question being asked. Brian Ambrose will retire at the end of this month, so the clerk would like to organise an update meeting with his successor and the chief executives of the International and City of Derry airports before summer recess, if members are content with that. And then additionally, members will be aware that there is a meeting with sectoral representatives being finalised for Thursday the 8th of July in relation to the aviation sector. It's anticipated that this would be a morning meeting, as the committee has the virtual forum meeting in the afternoon.
That week, Chair, is going to probably be quite busy before recess.
Oh, and I suppose just a final item of Chair's business, even though I already said we had the final one, on Monday.
Monday, yeah.
I had a video call with Lord Jay, who is chair of the Lords Protocol Subcommittee, and members will remember that we agreed that I would do that on the committee's behalf. Quite a useful conversation on issues to do with the protocol's implementation, as well as issues around the British government's replacement funding for EU funds. And we're going to continue that correspondence and conversation with the committee, as we have done in the past with the EU
Chair,
Affairs Committee.
They're very active correspondence, so we have a lot of letters. They copy everything to us that they're doing around the protocol, so we've a couple of letters in the pack, and that looks to be a set sort of pattern. They've got quite a level of activity going. Chair, it might just be worth mentioning too, they're doing a report. They're hoping to publish before the end of July around impact of the protocol. They've been taking evidence, and it ties in with items we have later on in the agenda.
Okay, so moving on then to item number 4, which is our departmental briefing on the June monitoring round. There's a clerk's memo at page 17 of your pack. There is a departmental written briefing on June monitoring at page 20, and the officials are now in the spotlight. So if I could welcome to the meeting Sharon Hetherington, who is Director of Finance in DFE, and Joanna Park, who is Accountant of Financial Management in DFE. So if I hand over to yourselves just to take us through the briefing, and then we can open up for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, as you've said, I'm joined by my colleague Joanna Park to brief members on June monitoring. So the paper members have in front of them this morning sets out my department's response to the June monitoring exercise. Members will be aware the monitoring exercise, which typically occurs 3 times a year, allows departments to realign its budget allocation on the basis of emerging need. The flexibility provided last year, allowing departments to reallocate non-ring-fence budgets to meet emerging pressures without recourse to DOF, has been extended to this year. So this allows departments to be more responsive in addressing emerging pressures. The paper sets out easements, budget pressures, reallocations that have been made, and bids for additional funding. I will briefly summarise the headline figures rounded to the nearest £1 million. Since the 21-22 budget was presented to the committee, DFE has been allocated £9 million for COVID for support for further education to provide a safe learning environment. Also, we've been allocated £32 million, which was £18 million for the COVID restrictions business support scheme and £14 million for the large tourism and hospitality business support scheme. In June monitoring, DFE has allocated £19 million of non-ring-fenced resource-style budget, and this has been allocated against an opening of commitment of £7 million and inescapable pressures of £8 million. So this has resulted in £4 million of unallocated funding available to deal with emerging pressures during the year. DFE has submitted 2 bids to DOF. So the first one is for £1 million of non-ring-fenced resource style to meet first-year costs associated with bringing 2 future global events to Northern Ireland. And then the second is an £11 million bid for depreciation charges for further education colleges. Moving on to capital, internal reduced requirements of £17 million were identified in June monitoring and were offset against bids of £3 million. So this leaves an unallocated budget of £14 million. As set out in the paper, there are a number of emerging capital pressures which are being kept under review to utilise this funding. We also await the allocation of £42 million capital for Project Stratum, and we're expecting that to be allocated in June monitoring. In advance of appearing at the committee today, members had asked 2 questions. The first question relates to the £9 million of financial transaction capital, or FTC, the reduced requirement in respect of the Ulster University Greater Belfast development. So the committee has asked for background about why the £9 million FTC could not be spent and whether it can be reallocated within the executive budget. So the FTC for the Greater Belfast development is ring-fenced within DFE, and therefore it cannot be used for any other DFE FTC projects. So the total funding secured for the Greater Belfast development was £126 million, and the initial 2021-22 FTC requirement for this project was £30 million, but this was based on the original spend profile before Ulster secured, and you will remember, the £25 million capital grant last year. So the capital grant had the effect of reducing last year's FTC requirement by 16 million, and it also then reduced this year's FTC requirement by 9 million. So therefore the 9 million is declared as a reduced requirement in June monitoring, and it will be available to the executive for reallocation. The second issue the committee have asked for information on is the department's position in relation to end-of-year surges in both capital and resource. So in DFE there were no unknown surges, and DFE performance against profile, with the exception of Ring-Fence Dale, was very good. The variance in Ring-Fence Dale relates to student loans, which is a difficult area to forecast, given the impact of market conditions, which are unknown until the 31st of March, have to be reflected into the budget and January monitoring. And also last year, COVID made that sort of decision even more pronounced. So in line with other jurisdictions, because of the increased uncertainty, an increased contingency was built in, which wasn't required, and that added further to the variance. But that risk was always known and understood, and was communicated to the committee in the January monitoring outcome. So, Chair, that's a quick summary of June monitoring, and I hope I've addressed the questions. Obviously, if there's more information in respect of those, we can pick it up. So Joanna and I will do our best to answer any questions that the committee might have, and provide additional clarification. And where we can't give you precise or complete answers, we'll be happy to write to the clerk to provide the necessary explanations. And where a question is specific to a business area, we'll ask our policy colleagues to provide a response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thanks for coming back to us with the responses to the questions that we had submitted. That's really useful to get that understanding of the reduced requirements. In relation to the unallocated capital DEL and some of the capital DEL that you are expecting to be allocated, is there any, or are you planning for using the capital DEL later in the year? Are there some projects that are identified, or is it potentially able to be allocated to some of those projects that you're expecting funding to be allocated for?
Well, I think we're expecting funding to be allocated for Project Stratum, so just over 42 million, and that money comes from Treasury. So I suppose we wouldn't want to be allocating our own capital DEL towards that if we, if there's a genuine use for it. And at this point in time, we have a number of issues that we're keeping under review, and we do believe that we may have a use for it, which is why we haven't surrendered it at this point. There are some projects in the higher education sector that we think could utilise this funding, but we're not at the position where we have enough information to allocate that to them. So that's why the money has remained unallocated.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'm always conscious of not asking policy questions, but just in relation to, you've mentioned the additional money that's been allocated for business supports. Obviously, we're all very hopeful that we are going to continue to see relaxations of restrictions, but we're also conscious of, changing situation, the Delta variant beginning to be seen here. And just wondering what kind of contingency work is being done by the department to look at potential further business support being required, or further support being required for the further and higher education sector later in the year, and what kind of planning is being done around that.
Well, I think you're right. Probably most of that does relate to policy, and if you want a more detailed answer, we can get our policy colleagues to come back. In terms of contingency arrangements, yes, we are continuing to engage with our colleagues across the department. So behind the scenes, no sooner has one monitoring round concluded, but we're really starting the process of engagement again. and just this morning, something in the FE sphere was brought to my attention in terms of COVID and COVID testing, but in terms of any of those schemes, I don't have detail of that, but policy colleagues are actively thinking about, even if restrictions aren't reintroduced, how they deliver their business may still be impacted. So that's something that's very much to the front of policy colleagues' minds, and we can see that in terms of our engagement. But if you want anything specific, someone on the policy side would need to come back to you.
Thanks for that, Sharon, and I appreciate it. And I assume the ability to have a wee bit of flexibility in terms of reallocating funding streams is useful in that respect as well. And again, that this one might not be for you specifically, but we all know that furlough ends or is due to end at the end of September, and that's something that as a committee we have expressed concern about, particularly in relation to some sectors. What conversations are being having with finance at the minute, and the impact that might have for you in terms of programmes that might need to be put in place to support workers, either for upskilling and also I suppose with the Department for Communities, training and employability? Is there a piece of work that is being done around that at a budgetary level, and then obviously there's policy level as well?
Sure. Well, you mentioned their flexibility at the outset, and I suppose the flexibility that's been extended this year again about reallocating non-ring fenced resource style is really useful, because we can be very agile if things happen. And also you'll remember that within the Economic Recovery Action Plan that we were afforded flexibility within that package. In terms of the conversations around what's happening, I think the Economic Recovery Action Plan was really a set of initiatives that was designed to support Northern Ireland economically as we hopefully charter a way out of this pandemic as this year progresses. Actually getting the Economic Recovery Action Plan fully funded at the outset has really meant that we haven't had to focus our time thinking about bids and rebidding and building bids. The focus now can be on delivery. It really, there isn't the same need, because we've had that funding up front to deliver those things. And that Recovery Action Plan has a number of pillars, skills being one of them, to help people reorientate themselves into other sectors. So I think just having that funding up front and agreed and with the flexibility has been really helpful.
Okay, thanks for that, Sharon. Mike, you're next up.
Oh, Chair, thank you. Sharon, thanks for the briefing. Can I ask about FTC and the adjustments? Because it's not just the Ulster University's Belfast campus. I think it's also Invest, NI, and the Central Park.
Yeah. There's within the FTC there is a ring-fenced reduced requirement for Invest NI and also the science parts. Joanna, can you pick on that? But I think that relates to receipts. Is that correct?
Yes, the science park relates to the receipts.
And the Invest NI is just that there is not the demand.
There's not the demand. I think obviously with alternative finance arrangements out there as well, there doesn't seem to have been the same demand for that loan scheme.
Well, what sort of alternative schemes are trumping FTC?
You would obviously have private finance initiatives as well, with lower interest rates and things like that. So, and obviously there has been support by the banks from some businesses. If you need further detail, I can ask Invest for further detail on the scheme. Please,
I'd be interested in it. I mean, just as a kind of general impression, it seems to me that when it comes to FTC, we tend to hand back more to Treasury than we distribute to third parties. Is it a particularly difficult scheme to operate from your viewpoint?
I think that there can be difficulties with it, and I suppose even the understanding of it. And I also think that there was a new accounting standard introduced in, I think it was 2019-20, which actually means there's a resource budget implication in future years. So the accounting standard required expected credit losses to be considered. So that is really whether they really were going to materialise or not. You have to make an estimate each year. You have to do a calculation to judge that. And there's a resource del implication as a result of FTC. So even that alone, if there are other viable sources of finance, that alone makes it a little less unattractive now.
And if there was a review, presumably that would be coming out of London rather than yourselves.
Yes, it would, though I do know that DOF are having a look at the investment fund, which is FTC, and we have engaged with DOF and made these points, because I suppose there maybe are different ways of dealing with it in Northern Ireland, but that said, it would have to be within the Westminster framework. And also the accounting standards. So there's limited scope to do anything differently.
And a final question, and forgive my ignorance, Sharon, but does the department actively promote FTC to third parties, or is that something you leave to invest?
In terms of engagement with business, that really is the role of Invest NI. We have used FTC, obviously you heard me talking there about Ulster University and the Greater Belfast Development, so that would have been through the department, not through Invest NI, but also SIB have a role in FTC as well, and they work across departments and sort of assessing options and opportunities to use it.
That's useful. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Gary, can we bring Gary into the spotlight?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Joanna and Sharon, for that. Just a brief comment, because one of the other questions has already been asked. It was in the briefing pack that members should note that the department still with an allocation of 42.3 million in relation to Project Stratum. First one is in terms of, I think you said, Joanna, that it was, or Sharon, I think it was, that this should come through. What are the risks there? And see, in terms of the city deals and the medical school at McGee, what are the funding allocations required there? What have you asked for? And are there any risks there as well in terms of if that allocation is not made?
Yeah. So I think, Joanna, do you want to pick up the first point, or yeah?
Yes. Gary, there are no risks in relation to Project Stratum. That has already been agreed with Treasury, and it's just the timing of when the money flows in from Treasury to Northern Ireland to flow to ourselves. In respect of city deals will be the profile of spend across a number of projects, and there will all be agreed by will really be the Belfast City Days, I think, this year, where there will be funding flow coming through. That will not need to be in the form of a bid. It will literally be a transfer from DOF through to ourselves. So there'll be no risk around those either. And the last one was in respect of the General Medical School. And again, it's anticipated that it will be 2.8 million of capital that would flow to ourselves. And I think that is probably for June monitoring round again. But again, that just depends on the funding flow and when it comes in from Treasury.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. That's really all the questions I have. So no doubt we'll hear from you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Can we bring John into the spotlight, please?
Thank you, Chair. Has the incoming or the new minister indicated that he plans to change the budget profile in any way or set new priorities which will impact on the budget?
John, not as far as I'm aware of. I don't believe so. You will appreciate that the new minister's only arrived on Monday, I haven't had any conversations with him in terms of budget, but the budget priorities, have been defined by the Economic Recovery Action Plan, really, which I think had collective buy-in. So the short answer is no. There has been no sort of communication around changing any budget allocations.
Are you aware if there's any, for want of a better financial term, spare cash around in relation to those students who weren't included in the previous minister's £500 COVID support? Is there still COVID money available to the executive, and therefore would there be COVID money available to the department if bid for?
I'm on. Joanna, do you know if there was any COVID money left from the May allocation? I know that DOF really they had a May exercise and did allocate COVID money where there was bids. I'm just not sure if they had any money left. Are you, Joanna?
I'm not either, and obviously, John, there may be other COVID allocations that'll come in through Barna Consequentials, and then there may be surrenders throughout the year. We do anticipate there probably will be further COVID exercises, and if there was a requirement, a bid could be made.
Okay. Joanna, could I just ask you just to clarify your comments around the funding for the McGee Medical School in relation to the £2.8 million? Did you say you're waiting on an allocation from Treasury for that?
That's my understanding, yes.
Right, but that funding is guaranteed?
Yes, we're just waiting on the funding flow coming in. We are going to get that. It's when the money hits the bank to transfer it us, John, more so than it's
so
really
the checks
just
in
a
the
timing
post,
issue.
that's what?
Yes, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Stuart?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the information you've been giving us today. Two areas. One, in relation to the department itself and the number of staff vacancies that are outstanding in the department, because clearly it's important the department has a full complement of staff to fulfil its obligations in its public-facing role. So where are you in relation to staff vacancies? And also, where are you in relation to return to working in departmental offices as opposed to home working, and what's the sort of time frame and plan around that? I have a second question after this.
Sure. Sorry, excuse me. So in relation to staff vacancies, obviously you'll be aware we have spoken to the committee about this in the past. It is a real challenge for DFE. I don't have the percentage of vacancies here with me today, but I know that it won't have changed significantly. I think some posts have been filled, but I don't expect. I think the last time we were here, the vacancy rate was about 25%, and I don't that has not dropped to anything, probably even like 15%. So that is still a real challenge for DFE, and I think across the civil service.
What's the blockage for that? What's the reasoning behind that? Is it simply this pace of recruitment due to COVID, or is it a lack of applicants?
I honestly couldn't comment on the number of applicants. That would probably be a question for next HR in DOF. But I think even before COVID, there were a reasonable number of vacancies around the system. I think COVID really magnified that, and recruitment was paused for a while,
yes,
and then it was reinstated. And it does seem a bit slower than maybe it would otherwise have been pre-COVID. So I think it's just a combination of factors. In terms of returning to the office, it is something that obviously DFE keep under review. Again, it's not my direct area of responsibility, but I can certainly tell you what I know. So management, are looking at this, but obviously very minded by we should only return to the office when it's safe to do so. You'll probably also be aware that the civil service is developing hubs across Northern Ireland for people to work in. So I think nobody really envisages return to the office 5 days a week and in the way that it was before COVID. And there is a programme of work within the department to work out how best do we do this. So certainly a lot of thought has been given to it, but sort of the overarching principle is we should only do that whenever it is safe to do so.
Okay, thank you. Can I turn to capital easements? And you've identified a number of areas where there's pressure. One in relation to IT for a tourism project, Embrace the Giant Spirit. And the second one is, the second largest one then is around the Presbyterian Mutual Society, further reduction in capital receipts. So 2 questions here. One, maybe if you could just explain in general what those pressures are, particularly for that IT for tourism. And then secondly, in relation to the PMS, are you on target in terms of the predicted outcomes in relation to it, or is it heading in the wrong direction or the right direction?
Okay, well, so in relation to the first one on tourism, I don't have a lot more detail on that, and if Joanna doesn't, then we can get somebody to come back to you on that. Okay. Joanna, do you have more detail on that?
Yes, that is a 0.8 million bid to create content to showcase the best of Northern Ireland and to align to the message of the brand of the Giant Spirit. So basically what that is the development of a lot of content that can be used over a number of years to market Northern Ireland as a tourism attraction, and a particular focus on different events and different attractions throughout the province.
So why is that described as a pressure?
It's a bid, basically. So it was a bid for them to get that funding in order to do that content. So they didn't have it in their initial budget, they then presented a bid.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Why was it not in the original budget? I mean, surely if you're planning a major campaign, you would want to cover all the bases in relation to your budget.
They did have, they have a budget allocation through ERAP and then obviously their normal baseline allocation, but perhaps it's that capital element, because this will then give them that content for a longer period of time.
Yeah. But not much point in having a campaign if you don't have the content.
I can refer this back if you want for a question.
Yeah.
I can't comment on why the original bid wasn't in there.
But one wonders why something is even financially approved if it isn't the whole story.
Sorry, I lost the signal there. Sorry.
I wonder why something is even financially approved when you clearly don't have the whole story in front of you, when people are coming back looking for additional substantial sums of money.
The bid was submitted as part of the June monitoring. They did not submit it as part of their initial budget request.
Yeah. So there was enough supporting information to justify an allocation in June monitoring. I think what we're not addressing is why was it not included in their original budget request.
Yes.
And if you want some more detail on that, we can refer it back to tourism.
Yeah, just wondering why it wasn't completely fleshed out, because you obviously, from a financial perspective, you approved the process, you approved the concept, but the concept wasn't actually complete, and they're coming back looking for more.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by you accrue the process.
Well, if somebody makes a bid for funding, finance have to assess the viability of that bid.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you obviously assessed it and said it was okay to proceed, but they're now coming back asking for more money that you don't actually have at this point in time.
No, I think this wasn't included at all, and now they've brought it forward as a bid, and we do have the money, so we have allocated it to them.
Okay, so it's not a pressure then.
It was a pressure as part of this exercise that we have recommended to be funded as part of this exercise, so that it can be taken forward. So we had a number of easements and we recommended to fund a number of pressures, and this was one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, in relation to PMS?
Yes. So in relation to PMS, that is the 500 odd thousand there is in relation to a further reduction in PMS capital receipts.
Yes.
You asked about PMS there, and I think broadly PMS is in line to achieve its sort of capital receipts, but this has been identified, and the reason why it's important to address it also is because our overall capital budget, so not just for PMS, but our overall capital budget is set net of those receipts. So if those receipts are less, that would impact our overall capital budget. So that pressure is to address that shortfall.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. And just a final question from myself is around the Economic Recovery Action Plan funding. So DFE has discretion in terms of how that's going to be spent. And I asked the Finance Minister about that, and he says there will still be a need for business cases to be completed and submitted to in respect of that. So just in relation to the monitoring of the funding, because it's a significant amount of funding that has been allocated, is there a process in place, and is that something that we could have sight of as it kind of develops over the next number of months, where the funding is going and how the spending is going?
Yes, so you're quite right. The Economic Recovery Action Plan is quite a sizable amount of money, and we do have flexibility. And in managing that, there is a team in the business area, and they are responsible. Obviously, they need to let finance know what's happening with it, but that team is responsible for managing that funding across the initiatives. And yes, as the Finance Minister has indicated to you, those initiatives will need business cases, and we'll have to follow the process for that. And we're engaging with our DOF supply colleagues about that.
Okay, it might be useful for us to get a briefing from the team in the department that is working on that, so that's something that we can seek to get. Sharon and Joanna, thanks very much. I don't have any more questions, so that's it for this morning. I'm sure we'll have you back soon enough.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything, Peter, we need to?
Chair, we have a couple of things to pick up on. Further detail around FTC that Mr Nesbitt had raised with Invest. We put that through the DALO. Potentially, if the committee was minded to write to Nick's HR and DOF to ask just exactly what's going on with the recruitment process. I know that they did a big staff officer competition, and they've been drawing down from the lists on that. I think EO1 and EO2 are advertised, but it might just be worthwhile finding out how that's all working and the sorts of timescales for it if members are content.
Yeah.
And we'll organise a briefing around that team that's managing the ERAP spend and seek a bit of detail in advance of that, Chair, if members are content to do that.
Okay. Members are happy enough. We'll move on then. Okay, so item number 5 is matters arising. At page 27 of your pack, there's a departmental response to a number of committee queries in relation to the reform of youth training. The response includes an outline of the support for learners in digital or broadband poverty, measures the department is putting in place to ensure that FE reaches disadvantaged and hard to reach communities, engagement with Training for Success providers who will not be part of Level 2 provision when Training for Success ends, details of the contract awards for all 3 levels. It's to note at this point, and I think we're still waiting on responses from the training providers.
Yeah, we're in contact with them, Chair, and we're just seeking their views on the issues that were raised and what sort of engagement they've got going forward.
Okay, so are members happy enough with that at this point, and we can come back?
Yeah,
Sorry, go
just
ahead, I didn't see.
a comment more than anything else in relation to hard to reach communities in relation to FE. I can remember in the dim distant past through various community groups and community facilities of the old Carrick Council when I was there, that they then Newton Abbey Tech delivered a lot of MALS and basic English skills to people right down in the community, literally paces from their own front door. A lot of that seems to be lost. Everybody has to go to a big centre and a big shiny school nowadays, and I just wonder, could we further tease that out in relation to what the FE College's plans actually are to get down into communities and to deliver those very basic skills?
Yeah, because it says in there about the 200 community outreach centres, Peter, so if there's something that we could get a wee bit more detail.
Chair, we have the FE Colleges with our informal tomorrow. That's probably a useful direct discussion with them, just exactly how they're doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
It's straight on a broader subject of the FE colleges, but I recently met with the trade unions who represent workers at Thompson's Euro seating, and they have presented me with a document which I'll send to the clerk, which talks about how in Germany and other European countries during furlough what they're doing is upskilling their workers, and they're using the further education sector to do that. So a worker who's on furlough is given so many hours additional training through the FE colleges, which allows them to upskill and be more competitive in the upcoming market. And the Unite Trade Union, who presented me with the document, are quite keen on it, but I'll send it through to the clerk, who can then give it to members as well.
Thanks, John. Okay, so moving on then to 5.2, there's a response from TEO regarding the committee's request from the 15th of January for information on the rigid ring fencing of COVID-19 support funding. So obviously we've moved on considerably since this, and now there is flexibility provided for. So the ring fencing rules mean that if the executive has allocated funds to specific bids, the department can only use the funds for that allocation, and unspent funds must be returned. If new pressures emerge, executive agreement must be sought before any easements from one ring-fenced executive allocation can be used to address another pressure. TEO advises that DAFE has been provided with an allocation for its COVID-19 recovery plan that allows it flexibility to allocate COVID-19 funding across various strands of that plan, which will allow flexibility across common initiatives addressing similar areas of economic recovery and will reduce the risk of vital expenditure not being used. So, just a note. 5.3 then, there is a clerk's memo at page 15 of table papers providing a summary of responses from Manufacturing NI and Logistics NI on the issue of freight shipping costs, which we requested at last week's meeting. So the responses outline that many manufacturers are experiencing this rise in costs given their reliance on international supply chains and getting goods to export markets. 86% of firms are reporting an increase in transportation costs due to a number of factors, which include, as countries have begun to reopen, global demand has significantly increased, which is outstripping supply. Container availability, including reduced production of containers being out of place as global logistics were impacted by COVID, containers being used by nations to store PPE. The admin burden and delay caused by Brexit formalities, and then the large ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal disrupted shipping patterns for a number of months. And then the final issue is fuel and other operating costs are also significantly increasing. So that is to note, it's a useful briefing. There's a report there as well from Logistics UK on the issues. Go ahead, Sinead.
Chair, yeah, that was really helpful actually, that document, but it just kind of illustrates, you know, a lot of pressures that manufacturing companies are under at the minute is not essentially about Brexit or the protocol, yet everything has been heaped in, you know, if there's any delays in anything at all, that it has to be about that, and we can see that there's significant delays in shipping, and the cost of it is really going to be massively impacted by those companies that that are involved in the whole shipping process, particularly to Asia. And one of the interesting parts of the briefing paper was that they don't foresee these costs being reduced for quite a long while, probably towards the end of 2022. So this is going to be see an an upping of costs for the customers as well, through all sorts of things. I mean, I was trying to get garden furniture, and it's just nearly impossible to get big, bulky supplies at the moment, and it's not down to the protocol, and it's not down to Brexit. It is really down to this global issue of shipping, and also obviously the cost of fuel is having a real impact as well. But it's something that we should keep an eye on and engage with logistic companies about this to see, is there anything that we can do to help support, because most bulk buying, Northern Ireland depends on shipping really to get all because of the nature of being an island, to get bulk products in here. So it's going to be impactful in all aspects.
Chair, we have open lines with Logistics NI, particularly with this sort of issue being so live.
Yeah.
And I know infrastructure committees also been looking at this as well. So I think between them, the two committees will be focusing quite a bit. As the chair says, the deputy chair says, there's a likely impact on consumers. Yes. So it's something that the likes of the sorts of bodies that monitor that and the pricing indexes and so on will be aware of. So yeah, it's one we have very much on our radar, and we have those open lines with the manufacturing groups and with Logistics NI. So we'll keep getting information from them. They're very helpful with regular updates, so we keep bringing those through. But as the Deputy Chair said, costs aren't going to go down anytime soon, and that will impact people directly.
Chair, should we contact CMA as well to ask them what their thoughts are about it? Because there are issues around that. Just the competitiveness of it. And the competition there.
We can write, Chair, if members are content.
Chair, interesting to note that yesterday Stena announced a new service from Belfast to Holyhead, a new shipping service twice a week. So there are a lot of changes in the whole global transit and logistics markets. But if you look at the red lines on that report which we've received, the increases are phenomenal. And the largest is actually in the cost of raw materials. And certainly there's an element of this could be predicted as we move out of COVID, but there's also an element of what might be described as gouging going on as well in relation to the world economy as a follow-up to COVID.
Okay, thanks for that. And Peter, we can do those things.
We write to the CMA, Chair, yeah.
Okay, so moving on then to 5.4, at page 94 of table papers, there's a response from the Finance Minister regarding the committee's request to consider funding the feasibility study for the NRChem process. The Minister responds indicating that the proposal will be more appropriate for an operational department such as DERA or DFE to consider funding a study given the connections with agriculture and commercial development, and obviously the committee has already corresponded with those departments also, and Invest.
Yes, Chair, we have. I know that NRChem has already got engagement with the new Minister from before, so we'd be fairly hopeful that we'll get a response fairly quickly on that one, and that the impartial feasibility study can be moved forward. Okay, so are members content that we would pass that response on then to NRChem?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on then to 5.5 at page 95 of table papers, there is the matrix that Colleges NI said they would provide us with last week on the hospitality qualification pathways from the colleges on the tourism and hospitality hub. So that's there, and it is quite useful to have a pictorial representation. So that's just to note at this point. The committee obviously will return to this issue when we receive the department's response to that briefing and its recommendations. So just to note at this point. So moving on then to 5.6 at page 97 of table papers, there's information provided by Colleges NI on the IFEX event following last week's briefing also. So again, it's just to note that, and it's likely that the event will fall between committee mandates.
It's March, April next year, so it's likely to be during dissolution.
Okay, and then just 5.7, and this isn't in the pack, but members will remember at last week's meeting the committee agreed to seek an update from stakeholders on the implementation of the protocol. Oh, yeah, John's lost connection. So responses from stakeholders indicate that it may be appropriate for an informal meeting to discuss the protocol implementation and impact. So if members were content, we would include the Business Brexit Working Group, Manufacturing NI, FSB and Logistics NI. And the clerk would seek to arrange that informal meeting on the 7th of July, which is our Wednesday, it's our last committee meeting.
Our last committee meeting, Chair. We have a bit of capacity, so what we would do is we'd come out of the meeting and switch to a Teams meeting with them, but they seem very keen to talk to members. Well, I'll just leave it at that. They seem very keen to talk.
And Peter, what we had initially kind of discussed was we might look at doing an inquiry similar to the ones we've done, but if we did the informal meeting, we would still do a report, and we would still have the ability then to, do whatever we would like to do with the report.
Yeah, Chair. As we do with the informals, we would write up a note of themes and issues that were discussed, and then the committee can take that, bring a motion if necessary. We can publish elements. There's all sorts of different things committee can do there. I think it was just the stakeholders are really keen to talk. So I suppose it's ideal to try and get that done before the summer recess.
Yep, no, that's grand. If our members are content that we would slot that in then for the 7th of July, and obviously by that point the grace period that is currently operating should have finished, so it'll be useful to get that information.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, then moving on to item number 6, the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Bill. There is a clerk's memo at page 99 of table papers. There is a draft public notice at page 105 of table papers. There is a draft public survey at page 106 of table papers, and a copy of the Hansard of the Departmental Briefing on the 9th of June at page 111 of table papers. So members will be aware, because I think most of us participated in the debate, but the bill passed its second stage in the Assembly on Monday and was referred to the committee then for committee stage on Tuesday. The committee stage has now begun, and the committee can issue a call for evidence on the bill. A public notice will be published in local newspapers and on the Assembly website as per usual practice. The notice provides an opportunity to submit views on the detail of the bill provided or by responding to the survey. Surveys such as this have been piloted by a number of committees, including those seeking views on a bill. The survey will be targeted at specific stakeholders and will be promoted through the Assembly and committee social media. It's hoped that it will prompt a much wider and more diverse response. The survey focuses on 3 key areas: the definition of a bereaved parent, how and when to take leave, and notice and evidence requirements. So what we want to do is to seek members' agreement for the publication of the evidence public notice and for this survey. So are members content that we would do those things?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair.
Just to remind members, a raise paper is being prepared on the bill, and we will be briefed by raise on the 7th of July, and the Bill's office are providing us a briefing on the 23rd, is that right?
23rd. I think we might have slipped that, Chair.
To the 30th? I think you told me the 30th. On the bill process itself. And Peter, in our request to raise, we asked them to cover the issues that the committee had already discussed, didn't we?
We supplied them with the analysis of consultation responses that the department had passed on for the bill. We'd also asked for local comparative and international comparative. Mm-hmm. So we know part of the issue they found is that there's a lot of movement at the minute on this, locally and internationally. So it's been very fluid, and they're needing to use a cross disciplinary team to do the research, so it's just meant that it hasn't come as quickly as we might have wanted, but we have it scheduled now for the 7th, and we're confident all those elements will be woven into it. It'll just give members a good idea of what's happening elsewhere and kind of give the basis for some discussion around that.
Okay.
Chair, there may be an opportunity in the current circumstances if the Assembly goes into some form of stasis as a result of failure to produce a Deputy First Minister. The Assembly nevertheless will continue on, and there may actually be an opportunity for us as a committee to work during what would not then be a recess to develop this bill to the point that if an Assembly does return, then we could be in a position to get the legislation through quicker than our current timetable. Could the clerk possibly look at how an accelerated, I don't mean accelerated in terms of the bill, but I mean accelerated in terms of our processes if we actually have got more time available to us?
Chair, the main thing we'll work from is the survey and call for evidence that we're putting out. That will take us through to the end of July. It'll take a couple of weeks to analyse that. As members are aware, bill is evidence-based. The report will be evidence-based. The evidence that we take forms the basis of the committee commentary. So we need that initial piece of work done. We don't want to just exclusively rely on the department's consultation. No. It's important we have our own piece of work. So as I say, by the end of July, we'll have a better picture of whether what we're getting is aligning with our consultation. If it's not, that's a whole new ballgame. If it is, then we can move forward to committee selecting which witnesses they want to bring in. Whether or not, Chair, we want to do events as well, because there'll be... Things have moved forward quite a bit with the bill, and as long as we can capture discussion, it can be used as evidence for a bill. So we're looking at how we might do some informal discussion events to allow people to talk about issues that would be very difficult for them to talk about maybe in a public committee session. Yes. So we need to make sure we've got all of our ducks in a row on just how far we can go and still be within the rules around bill scrutiny.
Great.
So we're working all that out now, Chair, Mr. Nesbitt.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, are we signing off the content of the survey today?
If we can, yes.
Okay, can I just raise a question again? I don't know the answer to this, but in the debate I mentioned that previously my old school used to send letters out with a salutation, parent/guardian.
Yes.
We're talking about parents and primary carers. Yeah, it's not the same thing, is it?
It's the definitions that are being used by the department. So this was part of the consultation. They had talked about parent/guardian, but there was a realisation that that didn't actually cover the full gamut of people, because you have family members who are in loco parentis but aren't necessarily official guardians.
That's right.
It came out as part of the consultation process that usual kind of salutation, as you say, that's used parent guardian, doesn't cover where they want to cover anymore. It's one of the issues that we'll pick up when we discuss this. That's probably something we can bank from the departmental consultation, because that kind of was where they got to with this definition.
So we're not excluding guardians?
No, we're not excluding anyone.
Okay. No,
okay. It's the caregiver idea just opens it up completely to anyone who provides the majority of care, if we want to put it that way. So it opens it up to foster carers, all sorts of other people. So it was trying to ensure nobody with a significant role would be left out.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Peter, see, just in relation to the questions where we are asking, agree or disagree, is it appropriate to ask for any other comments? And that, I know we have the bottom.
What we do is in our call for evidence is we make it very clear that the additional comments can be covering anything.
Any of the questions.
We tried not to put in too many boxes. We took some advice on this, and we've learned from the experience of other committees, and we found that if you put in more boxes, people just cut and paste the same comment, and that then starts to impact on you being able to run a report off the survey. So the boxes are strategically placed, if I can put it that way, on advice from maximising the utility of the survey. Obviously, the survey isn't the only method of contact, and it's probably important I say we will be writing out to all of our stakeholders and all of those who participated in the consultation. This is to try and capture, I guess, people who wouldn't normally do a contribution to a call for evidence for a bill, people find that really intimidating. It's, you know, if I write that, this is an impact on legislation, people do worry. So the survey is designed to be a bit more user-friendly and a bit softer. So it's kind of been designed with that in mind, but we will still ensure full commentary from organisations and individuals that are in a better position to be able to provide that. What we want to try and get with the survey is more of a feeling for how people will relate to this, how people interpret it, what they think it's telling them. So as I say, the boxes are strategically placed to do that, because we've also found that if you put in too many boxes, people abandon the survey halfway through. So there's been research went into this.
Okay. So are members happy enough with the survey that's there and the advertisement? Go ahead, Sinead.
Just based on the debate on Monday, there was quite a lot of feedback regarding miscarriage, and you know, that this might be an opportunity to expand this bill out. Obviously, that's not reflected in the survey at all, and probably it can't be because that's not.
If I explain, Chair, that the survey is drafted on bill as
it stands,
as introduced. So where we pick up then is we get that in additional commentary, anything else you'd like to say.
Right, okay.
And also we're aware of organisations that responded to the consultation previously that we'll be able to pick up on. I suppose it's continuing on from the conversation last week where Mr. Stalford had talked about wanting to be able to talk to groups that are looking at how this legislation might need to go in other directions. So we will pick up on that. Don't worry, we're live to those issues. I was just actually messaging the team there about getting our hands on the second stage debate as soon as possible so that we can analyse what issues have been raised that are not in the bill as drafted, and where we can go with those in terms of scope within the bill. I suppose there's two things to remember: is scope of the departmental remit and scope of the bill itself. And if you get to the point where you're looking at issues that aren't even tenuously within scope, then you're looking at a time scale. And the key thing with this bill is the department needs it done and dusted by that mid-November. We're looking to extend to as an absolute limit. In terms of getting to Royal Assent before the end of the year and then being able to draft and bring forward the necessary secondary legislation to enact the bill itself, with some of the flexibilities that have been talked about before in terms of the extension to 56 weeks of when the leave can be taken, and potentially then bring in these other issues as well. Mm-hmm. So we're alive to all of that, and it's kind of how we do it most efficiently to get it all packed into this condensed time period. I probably should say at this point as well, we're aware that some of the PMBs we're expecting have reached late drafting stage and will come. So at some stage, members are going to have a conversation about that volume and how it's managed. So we'll leave that for another day, Chair, but it's something I'm very conscious of at the minute.
Okay, so are members happy enough then with the notice, with the survey, and that we are happy to approve those?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've already agreed that last week. Scheduled now. So that might actually just be something worth mentioning as well, as we've now got our motion to extend scheduled for the 28th. We've a lot going on that day. Our LCM is the 28th. We're planning our debate on the High Street Stimulus Scheme. Feedback we got from the event last week on the 28th as well, so it's going to be a really busy day. So just if members want to make sure they're having that sort of flagged up in their diaries, there'll be a lot of speech making that day.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So moving on then to item number 7, the SL1 Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act 2020 Coronavirus Amendment of Certain Relevant Periods, number 2, Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. There's a clerk's memo at page 73. The SL1 is at page, sorry, did I say 73? Page 37, and SL1 at page 38. The proposed statutory rule will further extend provisions in the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act 2020, the SIG Act. These provisions will place restrictions on the service of statutory demands during what is termed the relevant period, and on the presentation of winding up petitions and the making of winding up orders where coronavirus has had an impact on company finances. The rule is subject to confirmatory resolution procedure. The anticipated date that the rule will come into operation is the 30th of June. This is the committee's opportunity to consider the policy set out in the SL1, as it's not possible to amend the rule once it has been made and laid in the Assembly Business Office. So members will be very familiar with this SR at this point. So this one is extending it from the 30th of June to the 30th of September.
Yes, Chair. So members were aware that the original piece of legislation would move forward in, I suppose, quarters. So we've basically brought it as far as the quarter ending this month. So we're now looking to extend it to the quarter ending at the end of September. The way the legislation works is because it's coronavirus, it will effectively be extendable until the pandemic status ends. So at the minute, the 30th is the next extension, but there's potential that it will have to be moved further on.
Okay, so are members happy enough with the policy direction?
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on then, item number 8, correspondence at page 43 of your pack from TEO committee regarding this committee's work on the protocol in relation to issues that businesses are having. So the TEO committee does not intend to pursue the issue in any more detail. However, due to its oversight role in relation to protocol issues, the committee has requested that they are copied into future correspondence on the matter by our committee. So are members content to respond to the TEO committee that this committee will continue to forward any papers that we consider and wish to share?
Thank you, Chair.
So 8.2, correspondence at page 44 from the Infrastructure Committee to the Economy Minister regarding further support for the taxi industry. Again, something we've raised on many occasions, so are members content to note? Correspondence then at page, I assume 45, from the Chair of the Lords Protocol Subcommittee to Paul Scully MP, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for BES. This correspondence poses a number of questions in relation to a proposal for a regulation of the European Parliament and of the Council on machinery products in terms of its implication of its application to the North under the protocol. So it's to note at this point, and this I suppose is what we referred to earlier in being copied into the correspondence. At page 48 then of your pack, there is correspondence from the Chair of the Lords Protocol Subcommittee to Paul Scully MP, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for BES. This correspondence poses a number of questions in relation to a draft Commission regulation on cosmetic products in terms of its implications of its applications to the North under the protocol. So again, just to note. Then at 8.5, there's correspondence at page 50 of your pack from Rural Community Network regarding digital connectivity in rural Ireland. A project consultant on the 5G Thinking project is writing to ask if this committee or RAISE has pursued work into the digital divide between rural and urban communities, and if so, what information we have published. Furthermore, he advises that he's running a series of events starting on the 23rd of June, which may be of interest to members. So the committee has not carried out or commissioned work into the digital divide, but it is a key element of strategies across the department and of Project Stratum. So are members content to respond, indicating that this is a key issue which the committee is aware of in its scrutiny of all departmental strategies, and that the committee would be grateful for an update on the outcome of this work?
Chair, I might actually add to that that has occurred to me just as you were speaking there. We do have correspondence with the councils on this that we haven't had a response. We had an initial contact. I think 10 of the 11 councils have a 5G group that's working on this. You might recall we had the informal with the group talking about 5G quite a way back. And we corresponded with the councils on that basis. So it might actually be useful if I chase that up, just to see what work is happening across the councils, and then perhaps join up the council representative, because they have a sort of person who's looking at this across councils, with the network, So they can sort of correspond more directly there, if members are content.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, 8.6, there is a briefing paper at page 52 from the Queen's Institute for Global Food Security outlining industrial hemp opportunities for the North. The paper outlines economic opportunities, healthy soil, CO2 emission reduction, social impacts and next steps. So would members be content to forward this paper to the Department for information? I have talked to Ian Marshall about this, and there is some really interesting stuff there. It might be useful to do an informal at some point.
Chair, it's one I think Miss Sugden has raised it on a number of occasions. It does sound really quite something, and obviously there's a real local angle with this. So absolutely, if members are content, we'll go ahead and organise a discussion, an informal meeting on it.
Yep.
Chair, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, it's one that I've been trying to inspire people to sort of take hold of for a while. Would it be useful to forward it as well to DERA, obviously, because there's links there in terms of agriculture and farmers and a new opportunity there.
I'm aware that Ian has also written to the chair of the ERA committee, so hopefully they'll also be dealing with it.
Chair, I think it's one they will want to pick up on.
Yeah, I just think it's a real opportunity for our cross-department working on this, if we could ever get back to that type of approach. But yeah, look, I'm happy to take it forward as well.
Thanks, Claire. And the clerk says he will liaise with the clerk of the ERA committee just to coordinate on that. Thank you. So moving on to 8.7 then, there is a copy of correspondence at page 55 from the Cabinet Office to the Chair of the Lords Commons Framework Scrutiny Committee. It gives an update on cross-cutting issues in relation to the common frameworks, including the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the Protocol and the UK Internal Market Act. The Cabinet Office notes that a significant proportion of EU regulations applying under the Protocol fall within the sphere of common frameworks. Thus, and I quote, there is scope for policy divergence between Northern Ireland and GB. The British Government is currently mapping which EU legislation is likely to amend the protocol, so it's to note at this point, and I'm sure we'll get responses.
Chair, it might just be worth linking that back to the previous couple of letters copied to us from the Lords Subcommittee, which looked at machinery and cosmetics. That's, I suppose, an indication of what we're talking about. Anything to do with goods where the EU changes its criteria for manufacturing and so on will impact on the market here, because we're obviously still part of the single market for goods. So it's that in live action, if you like.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Peter. 8.8 then, there is a copy of the 41st report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules 2020-2021 at page 61. So that is just for members to note.
Nope.
Yep.
And then moving on to item number 9, there is our forward work programme. So there is a copy of the forward work programme at page 116 of your pack, of table papers, and just our forward work programme up until recess.
And it's still accurate as of it's still accurate. It hasn't changed since yesterday.
So it's just for the next couple of weeks. We have Tourism NI and Tourism Ireland in next week. We also have our raised briefing on higher education funding models next week, so that will be one that the committee will be very interested in, and that's our short meeting.
It is next week's the short meeting, so we'll be next door in 29.
Okay, so members happy enough with that?
Thank you.
Then item number 10 is any other business, and none has been indicated.
Just very briefly, Chair, you will be aware that there was a Northern Ireland Audit Office report in relation to broadband, and will the committee be taking an opportunity to examine that?
Chair, we're aware that it's on the potential list of inquiries from the PAC. If they assert primacy, we step back until they've done their work.
Yes.
But I can speak to the PAC clerk to see if they can give us an indication of whether they're likely to pursue it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so item number 11 is the date, time and place of the next meeting, and it is next Wednesday morning in room 29, finishing at 12. We have our concurrent meeting with the Executive Office and Finance Committees this afternoon, and that is at 2 p.m. in the chamber. And then there is the informal meeting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. with the college principals via Teams. So we're busy.
Thank you very much,
Right,
Chair.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.